Alright, recording my Project 2 submission for a cs50M movie browser. Okay, in the movie browser I'm just going to go ahead and type in some data here to show functionality. And I created a two-tab navigators, or a movie browser with two tabs using the Material Top Tab Navigator. And using the Material Top Tab Navigator, I positioned my tabs on the bottom, which allowed me to have swipeability between the different screens. So when I'm on the Open Movie screen, or Open Movie Database, I can swipe right, or swipe left, sorry, and swipe over to the Movie Database. And when I enter data there, I'm actually getting data from a separate API. This is from the Movie Database API, and this is from Open Movie Database API. I basically wanted to use the two tabs to be able to browse two different APIs and display their information on the screen. In the back, or excuse me, on the engine behind the movie browser is the same for both screens. I'm using something called Search Movie Screen, which I created, and there was another screen for the Detail screen called Detail Movie Screen. And those two screens are the same screens behind each one of the tabs in the movie browser. I'm just using a little wrapper around excuse me, around the opening screen, which will send in the correct API to use when you get to the Search Movie screen. So let's start off. Let's look at the code and see what we're doing in the beginning. First, I have a Create Material Top Tab Navigator, and that contains two navigators. One is the Open Movie Stack Navigator, which is a stack navigator, and the other one is the Movie Stack Navigator, which is the stack navigator for the Movie API. And these stack navigators are created up here. I'm calling in each one of those a simple screen, and the screen simply sends in an API. The API, each one of these classes has an API, and it's simply the name of the API. This one is OMDB API, and the one for the movie is the TMDB API. So you can distinguish between the two APIs based on their name, or their API name. I send that over to Search Movies, and then Search Movies in the constructor will differentiate between the two different APIs and load one or the other. You may have noticed here that I'm using null, and that's because you only want to load one or the other. You load one, and then you will, if you try to load both, the second one will overwrite the first one, and you'll only get the second instance. So you only load one, and that's the one that's going to be in the first position. And then as you click on your tabs, you use something up here called, you have to import something called with navigation focus. And with navigation focus will give you is focused. And you can use the is focused prompt to find out whether or not you're in a certain route. And when you're in the route for Search Open Movies, by clicking on the first tab, then you can set your API to the appropriate class. If you're in the Movie Database tab, then you'll be routed to Search the Movies, and then you would change your API to the appropriate class. These are classes that I've written for each one of the APIs for OMDP API. This is Open Movie API. For the movie API, this is TMDB API. And they both have their own methods and private memory variables for handling things such as fetching the data from the API, issuing a valid query, validating the query that comes back from the API, handling the data. Once the data is back in JSON form, then you want to be able to handle it and massage the data so that you can present it on screen the way that you want to have it presented. And I have something called update media item, which does adds some extra fields to each one of the data sets so that all of the data is basically homogeneous. I don't have to look for any weird stuff while I'm displaying stuff to the screen. I have it all inside of my data object, and then that gets put out to JSON source, and JSON source is the thing that gets loaded at the very bottom in my render as in my flat list, this.state.json source. So it's pretty straightforward. I took all this stuff right off the API documentation. Nothing mysterious. The only thing that was difficult about it was getting all of these, or both of these APIs to work with one search screen and one detail screen. Other than that, the rest was just a lot of researching and reading and finding out the best way to get things to look the way I wanted them to look. Okay, so that's it. Pretty straightforward. And thanks for viewing my Project 2.